Hello and welcome back for match 2 with BUGOath. We are on the play and we have a Forbidden Orchard Oath of Druid's hand, so this is a pretty easy keep. We even have the ability to Vampiric Tutor on turn 1 to find whatever it is that we may be missing. In this case, I think that we may end up holding our Vampiric Tutor, oddly enough. Although it certainly depends. Now that our opponent is playing Mystic Remora, I see no reason to hold non-creatures. And so we'll Vampiric for a mental misstep. Which will allow us to both turn on our Force of Will, and should they simply play a 1-mana disruption spell, we can counter that and save our force. So I believe that they're mystical tutoring for Ancestral Recall, which is why I'm not misstepping it. And I would rather them spend the mana and commit to a plan that we can at least interact with than misstep it, let them draw a card, and untap with all of their options open. Unless you know that they're going for something like Yawgmoth's Will. I'm actually fairly inclined to let Mystical and Vampiric Tutor resolve when I'm holding Mental Misstep. Although that may, of course, be a bias that is to my detriment, but it's one that I have and am interested in interrogating. I also don't think that my opponent, who's taking this long to decide on Mystical Tutor, really has a plan. And so it is all the more likely that they end up getting Ancestral Recall. Instead, they Mystical for Demonic with no black source in play. No black source in play and a Remora to... Okay. So they want to Demonic for a non-creature. Fascinating. A non-instant, non-sorcery. I'm also happy letting this resolve. So that's what they wanted. So they're a Gush Bond deck. So my misstep was fairly risky in that if they gush into a misstep or have one of their own, then they get their Fast Bond into play. But here I get to save a Force of Will, which is quite nice. So we get Gristlebrand. Our opponent missed an attack, probably because it's fairly upsetting to get your Fast Bond countered. And we'll happily draw 7 and see what we can do with this turn. I think we'll start by recalling ourselves. Sack Lotus, cast Brainstorm, put back 2 lands, play a land, play a Mox, shuffle away those lands. Cast Time Walk. And cast Sensei's Divining Top. Discard literally anything but Gaia's Blessing. Oh, we still have mana. That's nice. So what we're really interested in here is Yawgmoth's Will. And so there's no Oath trigger. We have just the one tutor gone. We can Vampiric and... We still have Demonic and Mystical to find Yawgmoth's Will. So we'll start by looking. Finding nothing, we'll shuffle. And then we can attack and pass with Drain Swan Song and Force of Will available. Not giving our opponent a trigger on Oath of Druids, and really, given that they didn't have a counterspell last turn, I can't expect them to have 3 this turn. So we're pretty happy just draining this and casting Jace. Brainstorming, and we found our Demonic. Do we have the mana, though? I suppose it doesn't really matter. We have Gristlebrand and Blessing. And Voltaic Key. We can Thoughtseize our opponent, take their Talrand, leave them with a mana drain and 4 lands, and feel pretty good that they are dead to our hand of 3 counterspells. So that is roughly how the Gristlebrand plan plays out. So any sort of Gush deck. What do Gush decks play to beat Oath? Probably Trigon Predator, I would assume. But regardless, it's not going to be something that we can't Abrupt Decay. And we always have Show and Tell in case we get a Gristlebrand stuck in our hand. I think that all of this is actually rather good. Yeah, I can only really imagine wanting to add these cards. I think that Thoughtseize is fine. I think, actually, given that they're a Gush deck, the additional missteps might not be great. Fast Bond is a one-of, but ultimately what they're trying to do is cast Gush, and Mental Misstep doesn't interact with that as much as I'd like. It might be worth overloading Fast Bond, but I'm not entirely certain. I'm not sure of the role of Gaia's Blessing in this matchup. On one hand, we want to load up our graveyard for Yawgmoth's Will. On the other hand, I can certainly imagine the game going long. I can envision Talrand actually being a fairly problematic card for us. So taking infinite turns would be good. Therefore, we want the Tezzeret. I don't really think that we want to cast Show and Tell against their deck, given that they could put in something horrendous for us, like Talrand, and just cast a bunch of instants and sorceries, make a bunch of creatures, and make it hard for us to win with our Gristlebrand while also harassing our planeswalkers. So we will keep this hand. We have perfect mana, we have a Mox and an Orchard, and we have Time Walk and Jace. We even have Force of Will. It's really just a very good interactive hand. So I'm actually fine letting them cast Fast Bond here and fighting over their Gushes. I think when they're this low on cards, I don't really want to fight over Fast Bond. I want to fight their card draw. So I think we're just going to cast Time Walk as an Explore. Untap and see what options we have with more mana. So we have green mana, and we'll be able to have double blue regardless. So I'm fine fetching a second Underground Sea here, which means that I'd like to ponder before fetching. So we only really want Oath from this hand. We certainly don't want the Island, and the Demonic Tutor isn't great, but the Oath is exactly what we want. We could cast Oath right here, but I don't think that that's advisable. I think I would rather disrupt them with Thoughtseize. And we have a guaranteed green source, even if something bad happens to our Mox. So our opponent Mystical Tutors for either Recall or Gush. It sort of doesn't really matter because we're going to be forcing it. But I want to... The Mystical for Time Twister. Fascinating. So we take their Force of Will, and we'll leave them with a 0-card hand to our Oath, plus their single creature, which is exactly how we want this game to play out. Jace, almost a possibility, but of course our last two cards are Forbidden Orchard, Oath of Druids, so... It is going to take a very good top deck from our opponent to have them remain competitive in this game. Gush would certainly do it. Jace would not. Ancestral might. Actually, Ancestral would not. It would have to be Gush exactly. We shouldn't have paid life for that. I just got a little excited. But we do get to turn over cards, reveal our Gristlebrand. Load up our graveyard for our Yawgmoth's Will. And draw it on the 7th card. That's nice. could have played a land from our graveyard, but that is, I don't think, the most important thing about this turn. Time Walk is, and Mystical plus Ponder is. So if we Demonic for Time Vault and cast Key from our graveyard. So, yeah, we just Demonic for Vault and then Key Vault them, and we win the game. So, that is what happens when you get a Grosser Brand into play, is you activate it and then somehow you find a way to win. I'll be right back.